Yeah, today we're talking about portable buildings, or what today would be called prefabricated buildings. And then this material, zinc, is a surprising one on which we'll finish. Zinc is a soft metal, and when it was used in buildings, it was used in a way more like a tent, as a soft fabric on a frame. And it tends not to survive because zinc has a very high resale value. You got almost half the new price for this scrap zinc, and so they were very easily demolished. Here are some of the forms of building which were made and exported to Australia by different makers, William Kirkwood and James Middlemass. And here is the only building which we believe may have been a zinc house, which now survives near Castlemaine. It was built as the Friarstown Hotel near Guildford and then moved to the present site. It's not been fully investigated. It appears to be soft metal cladding, which is probably zinc, and it's, although it has now columns with curved corners which aren't original, it seems to be largely an original 1850s building. One final iron manufacturer I need to mention is Francis Morton, whom I reserve because most of his work tends to be later. Francis Morton made buildings in the 1850s, but went on to make a number of buildings through the later part of the century. This is an ornamental shooting lodge in which, to make it picturesque, apart from having Gothic window heads, he's inverted the roof in this concave curved form with decorative barge boards. Now, more interesting than that in a way is what's on either side of this picture. You see the same shooting lodge at the top, a more rudimentary barrel vaulted building at the bottom, which is very much more standard. On either side, though, are these telegraph poles, which he made especially for export to India, where the telegraph was being built, but some up here elsewhere. And you can see they're made in halved sections with the flange down either side, which is bolted together to make the complete telegraph pole. And why I mention that is that things like that survive in Australia at a ridiculously small scale. This post holding up a rubbish bin at Ravenswood in Queensland is made in the same sort of way. Is it sensible to say it must be made by the same man, Francis Morton? Well, you might think it's ridiculous, but when you actually look at it closely at the top of the post, there's Francis Morton's name appearing on that knob at the top. One reason that Morton is popular in Queensland is that he advertised, or his local agent, George Dibbs, advertised that there'd be no extra charge for delivering these buildings or components anywhere within 100 miles of a railhead. That means that in Queensland, where there was no north-south railway, but railways running inland from the coast at different points, much of the inland was within 100 miles of the terminus of the rail inland, and so much of Queensland could be supplied with these buildings at no extra charge. So you find not just the iron buildings, but components like these gates and fence here at Ravenswood with Francis Morton brand on them. Distinct from all those conventional buildings are glasshouses, conservatories, palm houses, hothouses, and so on. And this is one of the first that came to Australia. Built as the palm house in the Royal Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. We don't know exactly where it's from. It's quite possibly, though, from Germany, for reasons which I won't go into now. It survived on this site for some time, but was then demolished and moved to the Melbourne Zoo, where it became an aviary for doves, but on a reduced size, been chopped down in dimensions. Finally, was taken apart at the Melbourne Zoo, put into storage at Bendigo, and here are some of the components which still survive, and I hope maybe one day put together again. Here's another glasshouse which was from Germany. This was built in Adelaide. It was designed by Gustav Runge, who had made a major example in Germany itself, and the Adelaide one was ordered to be a replica of the existing German one, and it was brought out here, but much of the glass was broken and had to be replaced from local suppliers. But it's a very fine building. Here it is here. There inside it, a beautiful construction. And then there are humbler buildings. The one at the top is the Orchid House at Wyoming in Sydney. We don't know where it came from, but it's similar to the more regular domestic glass houses being made in both Britain and the United States, like the one in the bottom picture. And then this very lovely one at Ripponlea, the National Trust property in Melbourne. Although it was built in the present location in 1897, it may date from the 1880s and was moved to the present position in 1897. It bears the brand of the Sun Foundry in Glasgow, which had gone broke but was reconstructed and continued under the same name under different ownership. But it may have been because this building was earlier in date than 1887 that the brand still remains on it. There's the interior of that rather fine National Trust glasshouse. And there you can just make out the Sun Foundry brand at the bottom of the picture. Now here's the most interesting conservatory of all. This was built in the Melbourne suburb of Caulfield for the private house Labassa, then known as Ontario. And today it's on its original site, but it's been separated from the house. It's on a separate allotment and it's been largely converted for residential use. And we believe it to have come probably from Germany. It has a most interesting structure, first of all. The main roof frame is wrought iron with this arched form, and then above that is tension rod supporting the lantern above. And the structure is mostly iron, but with some timber components set into the framing, like the sash windows are of timber. Here you see that rod braced lantern at the top. The flooring is in tiles which are made by Billiers and Bosch of Mettlake in Germany, so they must have come out with the building. But most interesting of all is this pressed zinc cornice, beautifully designed material. Now, material like this was becoming available in Australia at a somewhat later date. This seems to have come from Germany, from suppliers who later on was to supply Ernest Wunderlich, the Melbourne retailer, who sold the same profiles later on and then came to make them himself in due course. Here now is a piece of it, which is from the roof cresting. It's zinc which has been pressed in two halves and then brazed together to make a solid unit. Now, the next material I want to turn to is a rather surprising one. It's papier mache. That is paper, old scrap paper, meshed up and mixed with paste and so on to make a hard material. And this was developed by a London manufacturer, C.F. Bielefeld. Bielefeld had been a maker of papier mache ornaments, cornices, centre flowers and so on, which would replace ornamental plasterwork in buildings. He was engaged then to do the panels for steamship cabins. Steamships were of course the new luxury mode of travel, and so they had panels with sort of recessed decorative forms between the cabins, and he realised that you could make a complete building in the same way. And he began making his papier mache buildings with panels of papier mache framed, of course, with a timber frame within them, with sheet metal on the face to make them watertight. But he soon discovered, or thought he discovered, that his new patent mixture was waterproof and he didn't even need sheet metal on the face, so he produced complete papier mache structures. This is one of them, a papier mache church. Whether this was ever built, we don't know. But there's the interior and plan of it. So this house was built. This is his largest sized house, his papier mache villa. And inside, you see the ceiling has the same sort of panels we saw at Woodlands, in which case now the papier mache panels drop in between the timber frame. And a man called Seymour decided to take a whole village of these buildings out to Melbourne. This is the smallest model here, his papier mache cottage. He took it out as a speculation, and until recently we didn't know what happened to them, but we now know that they were built in Coburg. Here's his village, designed to be sent to Australia, and there you see on the left that same villa we were just looking at. And in 1855 this advertisement appears in the Melbourne Argus because Seymour has gone broke and the village is being sold. Some of the buildings have been put up, some haven't. Some of them have the early form of papier mache with a galvanised iron sheeting on the outside, some don't. Some have flat roofs and some have pitched roofs. That's another change in the evolution of these buildings. But these buildings were sold and we don't know what happened to them, nor do we know the exact location of this site, what part of Coburg it was in. But here's the description in the auction notice.